Max Gawn, Melbourne Football Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
This is Nat Fyfe from the Fremantle Footy Club.
Trent Cotchin from the Richmond Footy Club.
Scott Pendlebury from the Collingwood Football Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Patrick Cooch from the Carlton Footy Club.
It's Rory Sloane here from the Adelaide Crows.
This is Tom Mitchell from the Hawthorn Footy Club, and you're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Hey friends, for one final time in 2022, you got MJ from the Coaches Panel. I hope you're well. Yep, can you believe it? Your fantasy footy season is just a couple of days away from wrapping up, but yet still a fair bit we want to get through on this episode. Joining me, as he has a ton of times throughout the 2022 season, I've got Jordox. Hello, mate. How are you?
Good, MJ. Good to be here for the last one. Can't believe it's nearly all done for season 2022.
It's all done and dusted, but like I said, there's still plenty to talk about. And a guy we've only had a handful of times, not even in 2022. So he's gone, I don't know, full Bradbury, where we've got him in for the final episode of 22. I've got Tim. Hello, mate. How are you, buddy?
Not too bad. Yourself?
Yeah, I'm good. Look, it's great to have both you boys here because we want to answer some of our Patreon questions very, very soon. Our Patreons are people that are financial supporters of what we do here at the Coaches Panel. It's one of the great ways we help do what we do all the time, but they also get some extra added bonus pieces of content that come their way, extra podcasts, hidden articles, private groups, and the power to ask questions on the pod. We will be answering some of those in a moment. But after that, we've got our 2022 Fantasy Footy Awards for the year. We're going to go club by club. I'll tell you about that more in just a moment. But maybe I'll throw this first question over to you, Tim, from Big Mal in Tassie, long-time Patreon and supporter of the Coaches Panel. He says he's heading into his league matchup in Supercoach as the underdog. So he's looking to get aggressive in certain ways through captaincy choices, emergency loopholing, all those kind of things we talk about a lot here on the podcast about how you can maximize your scoring without really having to make a trade. But are there any kind of other elements or things that he should be considering heading into this round that maybe aren't either of those two levers?
So basically without trading.
Without trading, what can he do to really maximize his points opportunity?
Well, I think if you're the underdog, the first thing is to just roll the dice with the risk reward players. So, pick a couple of guys who have the biggest ceiling, even if they're a bit flaky. Obviously if you've got like the top guys, you might go with that anyway, but your opponent might roll with the same guy. So you need to pick up points somewhere. So you definitely try and vice captain someone who's a big ceiling that maybe your opponent doesn't have pretty much, or someone who's definitely not going to vice captain, because you just need to get a big score that he doesn't have. And particularly if your vice captain kills it early, then it might make your opponent start trying something unusual too if they don't like that.
That's true.
So that'd be the first thing. Second thing, I think you just generally go with any loophole you can do. Like obviously to a lesser extent, depends who's playing on your bench with loopholes and what you've got available to you. But once again, if you've got a guy who might play, or you probably only have one shot in each line at the loophole anyway, wouldn't you?
Yeah, more than likely. Jordox, I know you don't play Supercoach, but there are obviously a lot of strategic parallels between Dream Team, which you do play. Any other things you'd add to kind of help Mal from a strategic perspective?
Well, I think Mal's already onto it by mentioning that taggers seem to have found their way back recently, and some superstars have been effective. And I look at last week as a great example of a really ballsy move you could do. So last Friday night we had Lachie Neale, and everyone was sort of expecting a tag to go his way.
Mm-hmm.
Some really smart coaches would have, if that's not a unique player, you're sharing Neale with your opponent, you could loop a Neale, and it feels very weird and goes against your intuition to loop a superstar. But if you can see a tag coming up now and you have an opportunity to loop someone that your opponent has, it might be a way to gain just even the slightest advantage. And last week it was very effective in Dream Team and Fantasy, with Neale being tagged to a rotten 60. And it obviously depends on what's on your bench, as Tim said.
Yep, it's certainly true. In terms of the big tags that could be coming, Harry Perriman's been sort of playing a run with negating midfield role. So there is a viable line of thought that he could be heading towards an Andy Brayshaw this round. So that's definitely one you'd want to keep some level of eye on. Port Adelaide are very restrictive. So they don't really tag, although Drew, I suspect, will run with Laird. The one that's intriguing me is that final game of the round. And Tim, I'm keen on your take on this while we're talking about tags. Saints taken on the Swans, Swans taken on the Saints. Clark, yes. Is he going to Hill or is he going to Sinclair?
See, you would have thought they'd put him on Sinclair, or I would have thought so. Or certainly if you're a Sinclair owner, you should be worried about that.
Yeah, I would be very much so. And then from a sorry, Jordox, what were you going to add in?
I was going to say on that, I like the idea of heading into Sunday and some coaches being scared off by the Clark tag on Sinclair.
Yep.
Don't underestimate the importance of taking Brad Hill out of the game.
No
question. I reckon it's 50-50.
Yep, it's very true. And then Sydney midfield, Kane and I talked about this a little bit on last week's episode about how teams choose to play that midfield of Sydney. Doesn't Owens go to a rebounder through the forward line and play there, or does he kind of look to head to Lloyd? Does he look, or Blakey's probably the more likely danger playmaker to go, but Windhager is the other one. Is it Parker? Is it Warner? Or is it Mills? Where do you boys think Windhager goes this week? And he's been quite restricted the past couple of weeks. Who do you think he's more likely to go to, given all three are candidates? We'll go with you,
on Parker.
You think he goes to Parker? What about for you, Tim?
I think he'd have an easier time trying to slow down Parker than the other two. He might not be quite up with the aerobic capacity of the other two. Just Parker sort of feels a bit like Neil in the way that he pretty much nailed Neil. But definitely Mills is the volume guy. So
I think that's
be one of those two.
Yeah, and that's the thing with Mills is even if offensively he's not impacting the game, defensively through tackles, he's one of the better premium midfielders we have. While he does have some positional instability where he can get flipped around to a centre bounce to the wing to the spare man down back, is because he's so good. He can score in so many different areas. So the only reason you'd be saving the C is if you're in Big Mal's territory of you're heading into Sunday, your VC only goes 115 and you need a 130, 140 to win it all, then he's probably someone you're really likely looking at. Well, there you go. There's a couple of tag options. Hope that's helpful for you. Nick's got a question. It's an ultimate footy one. I'll throw it over to you, Tim. What's the likelihood of Billings retaining forward status? He's looking at trading into him. What's your take on the forever injured Jack Billings?
Probably not the best one to ask that, to be honest. I really am unsure on that one myself. Have you got an opinion on the Billings forward status?
I think he's borderline to keep it because he spent a lot of time wing this year. But what we do know is that there was enough time early in the season based off champion data where he did pick up the forward status during the year. So I think it's a line ball. Sometimes ultimate footy just award those line balls, especially if we're a little shallow for forward premiums in the year. So I would say, Nick, it's line ball. I wouldn't trade into him blind without having that heavy confidence that he has it. And then second, I just don't think he's any more than at best 85, 90 forward. And so to leap blind into that St Kilda side continuing to need some kind of constant revolution, I wouldn't be going there just personally. I'd probably look to let it slide. And if come February, the position lands your way, I'm probably a little more hesitant like you, Tim, to want to trade into him. All right, last two questions before we get into our Fantasy Footy Awards club by club. Ian McRae has got one trade left to go in Supercoach and in Dream Team. Is there anybody with a matchup this week that you boys, again, it's probably format dependent, but that you would move heaven on earth on that would be a a really unusual choice from ceiling. Is there any names you'd like to throw in the mix?
I got two.
Yep.
I was just having to think before the pod about this. The only thing is, I don't know if I'd move heaven and earth to get these players, but certainly an unusual choice for the last game of the year would be both from the showdown on Saturday night.
Okay.
One is the big Rob Dog, Riley O'Brien,
Yes.
who's had a so-so year for fantasy and for the Crows, but he does come up against a fairly ruckless Port Adelaide.
Yeah, Finlayson.
And I think Rob's going to finish off on a big note. And then in the same game is Dan Houston. I just love his ceiling.
Yeah.
Last week he did really well in a big win against Essendon. I'm hoping it's not a big win against Adelaide, but he is a guy that can rack it up, and I think that's a good matchup for him.
Yeah. And any names you want to throw in the mix there, Tim? Again, format dependent maybe, but some guys that you think could have some really gravy matchups that could pop a unicorn score for the year?
Yeah, so if you're looking for unusual guys, firstly, I go Tom Lynch. Obviously, not the North Melbourne one.
No, so, he's not giving you nothing.
I know Lynch just kicked 8, so he obviously seems good, but his last 3 weeks have all been big, and especially if Rutten is still coaching this week, Essendon could concede 30 goals. It's just it could be really brutal. They're not going to care. They're going to get absolutely flogged. Unless Richmond rest half a dozen players for whatever reason, but with the pre-finals bye, that happens a lot less. So certainly a cheaper guy, Tom Lynch, should be pretty good. If you want some iffy names,
here we go. This is the real good ones, ladies and gentlemen. Right, these suckers down.
These are the guys who look good until they have their crap week and you realise you got sucked in. Like Nick Haynes, last 2 weeks has been pretty big. I imagine he's pretty cheap at the moment. So you wouldn't be moving heaven and earth to get him, but it'd be the kind of guy if you need to make one sort of cheaper trade and to get the one premium with the other one, you might go someone like him, or if you're unlimited funds. Again, they're playing Freo. I don't know if Freo is the kind of matchup you want to trade into, but the Giants do love chipping it around. So
they do.
Who's that? And I think you had a pretty good premium option too.
I've got a couple. If I love trading into blokes when it's their last game. So I know some might be keen on a Robbie Gray showdown medal number 37, but I'm more alluding to a player like a Ben McAvoy coming up against the Bulldogs. I think he, as a ruck forward option, shown some ability recently to score well. The past couple of weeks, in fact, for big chunks of the year, defenders against Melbourne have been a thing. And so a Kitty Coleman as a defender forward might just be the right sort of option. I know people are quite bullish on a Daniel Rich this week too. But for me, Coleman as a defender forward, potential versatility, gives you another look at a bench option. I don't mind. And then the Hawks take on the Dogs. So of course you could really go nuts on a Blake Hardwick sort of type if you really want to test your friendship with somebody. I wouldn't do it, but if you're looking for unusual that could go 130 plus, these are guys that have got potential and the matchups. You got any more Jordox before we move on?
Yeah, last one in the Hawks Bulldogs game. So I just want to paint this picture for you, all right? Last game of the year. Sam Mitchell's done a fantastic job at sort of changing the look of that Hawthorn midfield.
Oh, here it comes. I can smell this a mile off.
And Titch has been moved to the side. It's the last game of the year. It's at a ground that he loves historically. And if there is any idea that they might look to trade Tom Mitchell in the off-season, if I was Sam Mitchell, I'd say, go on, son. Get your 50 touches. Do what you do to just make you look a little prettier as we enter the trade period. If he does, oh boy, Tom Mitchell. He owes a lot of coaches. Anyone that's still got him, he does owe.
He certainly does too. All right. Well, there's a couple of ones. Last question we've got is from James. It's Supercoach question. Goldstein's listed as a test. That's true. He's got his last trade. Is it worth taking a punt on the likes of a Tom Lynch? Are there any other suggestions? I think you're right, James. I think you're looking at the one play matchup, and it was the first name that came out of Tim's mouth was Tom Lynch. You're looking for a guy that can give you 150. He's absolutely a guy that can give you 150. He can also give you 15. But but you got to go those high risk, high rewards. So I'm a Goldstein owner and Supercoach, and that's exactly the sort of move I'd be looking to make if you had the luxury of a trade to kind of roll through there. So,
and even because he's a test Goldstein, I actually think he'll get up and play, but it's still a play anyway. I mean, he's going to be up against Wits. Not going to be an easy matchup anyway. So if you got nothing else, I'd still look at doing it, even if you would.
It's going to be a fascinating round of footy before we do look to these 2022 awards. Is you've got 2 or 3 games that are spicy matchups, either because they're finals defining or reputational defining in terms of the showdown. And then one of the in these matchups I'm alluding to are Carlton and Collingwood. One team's pushing top 4, the other to push into the top 8. Brisbane and Melbourne, I think the loser's more than likely to slide out of the top 4 or just hold in through there. And then you've got a couple of matchups that could get very soft very quick and be very bruise-free footy. And I'm alluding to Giants Dockers, Essendon Richmond, even to a lesser extent, the Hawthorn Bulldogs game, if by then the Bulldogs year is done based on existing matchups. And again, the St Kilda Swans game, that final game of the year where there's one team that's out of the equation, almost mathematically possible, but by then it'll be known whether the Saints can't make it. So we could see some real bruise-free footy as well as some absolute final style footy in at least 3 matchups this week. So it's a fascinating round of footy for coaches to look at. All right. Well, as we do in our final in-season podcast of the year, we always look to award our fantasy footy awards. But rather than looking across the entirety of the comp and saying who are our best cash cows or whatever the category is, we like looking at it club by club, just a little bit, give a bit of love to every AFL team. So we'll rocket fire through them, but we're going to go team by team. Jordox, I want you to find for me the MVP of every team. Now, it doesn't mean it's the best scorer, the best average, but who you're saying, whatever that category is MVP. Tim, you're one of the draft experts we've got here at the coaches panel. So I want you to find almost like the boom draft pick. So it could be that you nailed the first rounder, but I think you might be heading down the average draft position. Maybe a little more. We'll see how you go. Jordox, we're going to keep you busy on this pod. Then I'd love for you to find me the cash cow from that club that we should have had. So coming back into salary caps. And then I'll wrap us up with a 2023 watch list player from that club. Whew, we got a lot to get through in the next 30 minutes or so. So Jordox, let's go to the Crows. Who's the MVP?
Well, he's the MVP of the whole competition, Rory Laird. Absolutely stunning season from a fantasy perspective. So that's a fairly easy one. I mean, he's cleared the 120 average in both the formats. Yep. And really, if you didn't have him on the back end of the year, you're probably not going to be having too much success, whether it be overall or in your leagues.
Yep, fair enough too. Dawson, probably unlucky, but that's just more how good Laird has been rather than anything else. Tim, who's our draft superstar from the Crows?
All right, so honourable mentions to the 2 guys you just said, Dawson and Laird. Pretty good picks if you got them, even where they went. But best draft pick or waiver pickup had to be Sam Berry.
Yep.
If he even got drafted, his average draft position is 320 for a guy averaging mid-80s as a forward. So if you ever drafted him, you've done well. You'd be very happy.
Oh, you would. All right. Cash cows from the Crows. We got a couple this year. Jordox, who are we giving it to?
I think the first one you think of is Josh Rochelle because of the start he had, but I reckon the cash cow of the year is Jake Soligo, who played the first game or 2 at a very small score, had to find his way in the 2s, but has played every game since round 9 for Adelaide, and has really established himself in the squad. He's great to watch as a Crows fan, and he's scored and made probably the most money. I think he would have made more money than Rochelle by the end of it.
Yep. No, he's a good shout. For me, the 2023 watch list from the Crows, we've already mentioned his name. I could have said Schonberg, but that's a lot of future forecasting. I could have gone back and picked the easy picks of Dawson and Laird, but I'm not doing that. for me, Sam Berry has got all the pedigree to be a legitimate A-grade premium. So since, and Tim alluded to him, since the past 9 games, he's going to lose forward status. But in the past 9 games, he's averaging a mid to low 90s across the format. He's regularly getting 10 plus tackles. And it's something that we talk about in our keeper league content when we do our top 50 keeper league prospects, which by the way will be dropping through October for our Patreons and paid Spotify subscribers. So you can go and check that out. But we often talk about a guy that can get 20 touches and then build columns of tackles, marks, and goals up to a total of 10. Berry's already there on tackles alone. And in the past 9 games, he's only had 3 games with 20 disposals or more. So if he can bump up some of those possessions, he's heading very much in the trend of how Jack Steele was developing in early days at St Kilda. So for me, he's on the 2023 watch list. Let's go to Brisbane. Who's the MVP, Jordox?
Yeah, pretty easy one again. Lachie Neale was a very, very popular pick at the start of the year. And, I know he's tapered off a little bit in the last 4 to 5 weeks. There's been some tag affected games, and Hugh McLuggage is coming for him in a big way in terms of the best fantasy guy at Brisbane. But no, Lachie Neale, pretty easy one.
Nice. That draft one, I'm fascinated to see who you're handing this out to, Tim. There's a couple that could be right in the mix.
Yeah, I actually found it hard with Brisbane. There's no clear standout. Like even guys like McCluggage who have been on fire lately, he didn't start off that way. So his actually season average is pretty much about what you would have guessed. So couldn't really call him a draft bargain.
Okay.
The best one is a guy who seemed to be off waivers early on the season. That's a guy you spoke about earlier, Kitty Coleman. The back forward averaging close to 80. Draft position was 272 on average, but most likely if he got picked up, he would have been dropped. So
yep,
I think anyone who picked him up would have been pretty wrapped.
Good shout.
I reckon.
Yeah, and that versatility in drafts to have that defender forward, flip it around, depending. Like you're right, that's huge. Nice shout. Who's the cow that we're giving this to, Jordox? I think this could be another fun one for you.
Yeah, I did struggle with the Brisbane kids and the Brisbane cows, and I actually landed on Kadeem Coleman as well. I know he wasn't, basement price, but he was someone that a lot of people did jump on earlier in the year and probably got burnt, but anyone that either stuck fat or jumped on at the right time, he had a nice little patch when Daniel Rich kept getting either knocked out or hurt or sick. He had this patch of being in and out, and Coleman lapped it up, got some good scores in there. But yeah, tough with Brisbane, top side. There weren't a lot of kids coming through, so I had to go to Coleman.
Yeah, I don't think that's, some people, again, depending on the format you play, go, he's not a cow, how dare you? But his starting price in Supercoach was just over 260,000, and he was under 350 in DT. And so, yeah, I think it's probably stretching, but in terms of making us money, he's absolutely a shout across the formats, no doubt. For me, look, there's a couple of lines I like the look of, but I'm going after Darcy Wilmont. For me, he was in a lot of starting squads this year, real attacking, aggressive rebounder. But with the emergence of Kitty Coleman that you've both alluded to, people just haven't been able to see a space for him. I would be really surprised to not see him get games early next year. He might even push up to the wing as McCluggage just kind of establishes himself more as a centre bounce midfielder too. So Wilmont for me is going to be the basement price cow I've got my eye on. Let's talk about the Blues. Oh, yeah, sorry.
One more for Brisbane, Will Ashcroft.
Yeah, good shout.
Hasn't been drafted yet, but he will be.
Well, yeah, technically I didn't want to pick a guy that's not arrived yet, but gee whiz, he's the guy.
He'll be in everyone's team.
He's going to be in everyone's team. He'll be in the 50 most relevant just because he'll be in everyone's team. Yes, I've given away one of the 50. I'm so sorry. But you're right. He's absolutely a guy that we should be looking at next year. Let's talk about the Blues. Who's the MVP?
Sam Doherty. Incredible story. So great to see him out there. I certainly didn't think he'd come back and dominate from a fantasy perspective the way he has. Special mention to Paddy Cripps, who's really found his 2018 form, if you can remember that far back. But no, Sam Doherty across the board, absolute star. Even on the weekend, thrown into the guts, getting CBAs, laying tackles. He does it all. Legend.
Yep. Good shout. Draft.
Draft, yep. Doherty is
Wow,
averaging
yeah.
109, and his average draft position was 119. So basically, picking up 110 defender in the
Like
10th,
the 10th,
or 12th
11th,
round,
12th
or whatever,
round.
depending how big your draft is, that's just ridiculous.
Gee whiz, that's
Like
there's
that's
been
the
some
sort of thing
steals.
that wins you draft leagues. So
Yes, it
basically,
is.
played basically every game, and you got in there. So to win draft leagues, it's not like you want to draft a guy, one round earlier than people thought he should have been and have a hit with that. Doesn't really win you draft leagues. It's when you get a guy like Doherty in the 10th or 12th round, that wins you draft leagues.
Yeah, 100%. It's a good shout. From a Cows perspective, we had a couple to look at. Jordox, who have you landed for us?
Yeah, well, if you didn't like Kadeem Coleman, you're not going to like this guy. And again, the definition of cash cow, I mean, the way I looked at it was who was someone that you started with or picked up with the intent to make you money and
Sure.
sell them.
That's fine. That's
this guy ended up, but this guy ended up being a keeper. So George Hewitt came across from Sydney, defender status. I think everyone sort of jumped on thinking we'll get 100K out of him and move him on. And, if not for his back injury, he became a keeper for the whole year. So another one that probably didn't go too early in drafts as well and would have been very handy for the year. Averaging, I think, 99 DT and probably similar in Supercoach. Not bad.
Yeah, look, Durden's probably the other one if you want a genuine cow, but he was never a monster for you that really burnt you. But yeah, if you're taking the value buy of the year, 100% he's it. From me, the guy I'm genuinely watching in 2023 from the Blues is Sam Walsh. People are talking about it not being a great year, and yet pre-buy in Supercoach, he was going at an average of 117 and 106 in AFL fantasy, while post-buy, he's going at just the 104 in Supercoach and 100 in AFL fantasy. He's lost a little bit of that ceiling because he's been pushed out of centre bounces a little bit more, spent some time coming off half forward, some time coming off the wing. But I'm genuinely convinced that he's one of the safest 110 guys over the next 7 to 8 years. And if he can recapture some of that ceiling, I think even if Carlton don't make finals this year, they're going to be a serious contender, that midfield mix. So for me, it's Sammy Walsh. Let's talk about Tim's Magpies. Who's our MVP, Jordox?
Tricky one. Collingwood, since Nathan Buckley left, they're not the fantasy-friendly side that we once adored.
No.
But they're winning games of footy, so Tim's happy. But I gave Darcy Cameron the MVP. I just thought
shout.
The way he stepped in when Grundy went down, and for those brave enough to jump on early in the piece across the formats, was hugely rewarding. I thought I'd give it to Jack Crisp, but his second half of the year's been pretty average. For Darcy Cameron.
Yep, don't mind that shout. Tim, who's our draft star that we're talking about from the Collingwood Football Club?
Yeah, just a quick one before I mention that. Just following on Jordox's thing, pretty much every Collingwood player who averaged over 60 last year has dropped 10 to 20% this year.
Wow.
Like it's just the game style. There's only 4 players who would be draftable who've actually gone up this year. And one of those, Jamie Elliott, basically held level.
Sure.
But it basically suggests he's had a better year because if you've held level in this new game style, he's actually done well. And the other 3 are Josh Dacos, who's been all right. No superstar, but Pendlebury has actually gone up.
Yep, as a back.
And Jordox's man, Darcy Cameron. So
wow.
Darcy Cameron, definitely the best buy in drafts. He would have been a free agent pickup probably, unless you're in the category league I'm in, where for some reason he was either drafted early or even kept or something, which was a brave move behind Grundy, who hadn't missed a game in 7 years. But there you go.
That is a bold strategy, Cotton. 100% for pulling that out, and that's worked for you. I feel like the question I'm about to ask you, Jordox, might be close to the dumbest question I've ever asked, but I'm throwing it out there anyway. Who's the cow from the Pies?
Not who you think it is. No, I'm joking.
It's
Nick
not Ginnivan?
No. By a country mile. In fact, I nearly had Nick Dacos as the MVP as well. I mean, what an absolute, it's exciting to think we get to automatically just pick this guy every year for the next 10 years.
Yeah. Look, he had an ADP in Ultimate Footy of 143. So you could have built a case that, we could all be saying Dacos for every single category here if we wanted to. He's the best first-year fantasy player in my eyes. I know some would compare it to Barlow. I don't think that's fair. I think because he's been defensive eligible, that's moved him up a rung that guys like Toby Green, Sam Walsh, just haven't been able to hit. So for me, this is the best debut season of a first-year player I've ever seen. Just absolute gun. In terms of who I've got an eye on for 2023, there's a couple you could throw in there. Dacos could genuinely be one of them, but it's not who I've got. For me, there's a real obvious low-hanging fruit, and that's Brodie Grundy, and that is he's a genuine A-grade ruckman. There's a chance he might not be at the club, so that's obviously a big caveat. But as good as Darcy Cameron has been this year, I think sometimes with recency bias, we just forget how good Grundy is as a footballer. He'll be given a significant discount after only playing a handful of games this year. In AFL fantasy, it might not be as appealing because they only award the discount to the higher years average of the previous two, which means he's going to find himself based off his average of 2021, which is a 104. A 106. So it won't be at the 93.3 in Dream Team or the 103 in Supercoach where he's getting that average. But for me, the Rucks is a really tough line potentially in 23. So he's one. The other, if he lands there, Tim Taranto. If he lands there, Timmy Taranto will be really hard to ignore at that Collingwood team.
Yeah, see, I was actually going the other way with Taranto. I was thinking if he comes to Collingwood, like you saw what happened to the rest of the Pies players in fantasy this year.
Yeah.
I know the Pies have said that they would be looking for a midfielder, so suggesting if they got someone like Taranto, they'd play him in the midfield, not up forward.
Yep.
But he'd be playing in Collingwood's game style, so...
That's true. Yep, it's a really good shout. It'll be interesting to see what happens there because the other club he's rumored to go to is Richmond, which is equally as unappealing of that 110 fantasy premium, which he has shown he's got the potential in AFL fantasy and 105 in Supercoach. So if he was heading towards, I don't know, like a St Kilda, like it'd be really interesting for us, but unfortunately not likely to head to a club we're interested in. Let's talk about the Bombers, or are they Jordox? Is there something you want to say about the Pies before we move on?
Yeah, just Jordan De Goey is the one that interests me for next year. Whether he leaves or moves, whatever he does, he's underperformed for what he's capable of, and if he can focus on footy and there's not as many distractions as there's been. He's someone I've got a good eye on for next year.
All right, fair enough. Let's talk Bombers. Who's the MVP, man?
Yeah, so interesting year for Zach Merritt. He takes out the MVP. Really interesting year. I know he missed a bit of footy earlier in the year with that injury. Since he's come back, he was like a budget guy to jump on.
Yeah,
gave coaches, some huge scores and really looked like. Actually, I know in Dream Team, in terms of price, had he not been tagged to that 55, he was headed to the $1 million mark with Laird. Who would have thought that when coaches probably paid under 800K for him, thinking this guy will get to $1 million? He didn't, and he's actually since been disappointing. So he's had two tag games.
Two very heavy tags, yeah. He's got Richmond this week, so he won't cop that. He'll give people a nice final week, but...
might be too late for me and G. He may have my prelim. But that's okay. He'll get the MVP. Who else? Who else at the Bombers?
It might be someone that Tim's about to mention, so we'll see. But I think you're right. I think he's the clear best Bomber. For drafts, though, they have given us a couple of nice bargain picks, though, Tim. So who have you landed with?
Yeah, the best buy for drafts I would have is Mason Redman.
Yep.
Yeah. He's averaging 87, ADP of 260. Potentially would even have been a waiver pickup around early season. And he's had a couple of monster scores too. People who've done that. So
How close was Nick Martin, just out of curiosity for you? Because again, he was probably drafted in
Yeah.
a similar position.
I had two guys. I had Redmond 1 and Martin 2.
Yeah.
Martin definitely was a waiver pickup, but he pretty much would have been everyone's number one choice after round 1.
Correct.
So whoever had first pick probably got him after round 1. And he's slowed down a bit, but he's an 80 averaging forward. So
you're right. No, I agree. I think Redmond's one. By the way, he was in Ultimate Footy, which is where we're basing all our drafting data off, was drafted in 56% of teams. So, very nice draft day pickup for you, even better for you if you're doing that. For me, the Essendon player I'm really keeping an eye on is Darcy Parish for 2023. Pre-injury this year, he was going at 108 in AFL Fantasy and 118 in Supercoach. So presents some value. However, really big red flag around the uncertainty of who's coaching that team, and stylistically, even if Rutten is coaching, what that means. Clearly, there's some significant change coming to that club. So any club that's got big unknowns around them in August, when you're looking at March for 23, they're really hard to project into. So Paris should be the one. But again, I'm not sold without knowing the other variables. Go Jordox before we move to the next club.
Just a quick one, Jordan Ridley. Especially if there's a new coach and a new game plan, he's going to be a fantasy gun. I'm still sure of it.
He's still holding on. Still holding on. Let's talk about
just needs the kickouts, doesn't he?
Just needs the kickouts back.
That's where he scored.
He's got that great first name. Now, we missed the cash cow, MJ.
I missed the cash cow. Sorry, mate. Come through.
I think because subconsciously Tim mentioned him and you knew.
That's exactly. Let's go with that.
But Nick Martin, cash cow.
Unbelievable.
Pretty stiff not to get cash cow of the year. Let's not forget the guy started round 1, 5 goals from midfield, basically, getting smashed by Geelong. So
I don't even know if he's kicked 5 for the rest of the year. So that's just very impressive.
He's actually kicked a reasonable amount of goals.
Oh, there you go. Well, I'll just shut my pie hole. Fair enough. All right. All right, let's go to the Dockers. MVP. Who are you handing this one to?
Another pretty easy one. Andrew Brayshaw. And I really enjoyed this one because I did the Andrew Brayshaw episode with you in the top 50 at the start of the year.
Yes.
And we were pretty excited by him, and he's gone on with it. Absolutely smashed it. But the only knock is the tag games.
Mm-hmm.
But like you were talking about Walsh before, these guys are still so young.
Yeah.
And Brayshaw's shown, the ceiling. I think that took everyone, made everyone sit up and take notice of him. Was
that round 2 monster. Yeah.
But Brayshaw, pretty idiot for you.
The draft is interesting. The Dockers have given us a couple of nice little picks. Who have you landed with, Tim?
I've actually got 3 good ones. I've had a few. The best one is got to be Will Brodie.
Yeah.
The guy who screwed everyone in drafts for about 6 years has finally come good and has averaged 94 for ADP of 128, which is surprisingly high, 128 ADP for a guy.
That's probably more reflective
of his history of screwing people.
Isn't it? Yeah, that's it.
So everyone obviously thought, you know what, I'm going to pile on again. And it worked this year. So well done if you did that.
Well done.
Next one, Hayden Young. ADP of 189. So nearly picked 200 in the draft. You've got an 87 averaging defender.
Potentially last on-field guy you picked, depending on the size of your squads and leagues. That's decent.
Yep, and then honourable mention to Clark as well. He's averaging
Clark
in the 80s from a pick around about 200. So,
geez, that's a nice pick. For me, the 2023 watch list we'll get to in a minute. We're coming back to the cows for you, Jordox. who have you got for me, man?
Well, it's the same thing. Someone that Tim mentioned. So that's why you've switched on to the next bit. But look, special mention to Nathan O'Driscoll, who was really exciting.
Yes, really important for a couple of weeks there.
But got injured, and that was a shame. But again, Will Brodie, I mean, you would have picked him up with the intent to play him, make the cash, and move him on, and he's in most sides still as a keeper, so he gets the cash cow for the Dockers for me.
It's true. And again, some formats, he's legitimately in the category of a genuine cash cow. In others, he's slightly more inflated, but definitely the best moneymaker we could have asked for from the Fremantle Footy Club. For me, the 2023 watch list is their skipper, Nat Fyfe. He's right now, this will be his lowest seasonal average ever in his entire career across the formats. And these are the caveats of selecting him. Injury-free preseason. It's going to be hard to ignore. And then he's a genuine candidate for mid-forward status. Genuine candidate for mid-forward status. If either of those, if not either, if it's an injury-free preseason, it's going to be hard to ignore. If he gets DPP, watch the crowd flock onto Nat Fyfe in 2023, because this guy can go, even in AFL Fantasy and Dream Team, he can go 90s really easily. And Mundy's out of that midfield unit next year. So he's not going to be the key forward solution to him. Let's talk about the Cats. Who's the MVP, Jordox? This could go a couple of ways.
Tricky one. But looking at the Supercoach scores as well, I landed on Tom Stewart, despite missing, 4 games when he was suspended. Just his ceiling, and he's great to watch when he's on. He hasn't quite been the same since that suspension coming back.
No, that's true.
But Geelong, they're such a good, even spread side. It was hard to find anyone that truly dominated.
Yep. In drafts, we got some value there, Tim, but who was the real winner?
Yes, no real great standout. But I've gone with the utility man, who Chris Scott says is not a utility. Blitzer, so that's right. He's ADP of 171, and for that you got a guy averaging 90 as a ruck defender. So first, that positional flexibility. Secondly, he's actually the number 7 ruckman in the league this year for average. So not bad. Not bad.
And there was a mid-year chunk too where he was playing that number 1 ruck role that he was going as good as anyone, if not at the best ruck, when we were really struggling in that middle time where Gawn was up and down, Grundy was out injured, Marshall was ruck sharing, O'Brien hadn't popped, Darcy hadn't popped. I'd have to run the numbers, Tim, but there's probably a period of time he might have been the best ruck for a 3 to 5 week window.
Could have been. And he's even now just a couple of points behind about 3rd for the ruckman on the season, who I think is Marshall, off the top of my head. So, guys,
put him in a category league or a deep dynasty league, then all of a sudden, you're right. He's an absolute game-changing pick. Good shout.
Yep. Except that he was rested for one of the weeks of finals in.
Oh yeah, that brings you back to the package, doesn't it? Yeah. That aside from probably costing someone their finals matchup, he's been great. Who's the cow, Jordox? We needing to leverage some stretching, or is there a pretty obvious option for you?
I think this guy was fairly cheap across the board. You'll tell me if I'm wrong, but Tyson Stengel, 3 times a charm in AFL land at his 3rd club. And, credit for Geelong to giving him another go and putting things in place so that he can become the player he's become. I mean, he could be pushing all Australian. He's been a great get for the Cats and he's helping them lead their way to yet another potential premiership challenge.
Yeah, another deep finals entry is coming for them. That's without doubt. For the watch list, there's one that's a really obvious, and then there's one that is a very, very big Hail Mary. The obvious one I'll give you is Patrick Dangerfield. And the reason I'm saying that is it's his lowest seasonal average since 2011. Like Fyfe, I could almost Control V, Control C. The thoughts of possible DPP, proven 110 to 120 plus guy across formats, but he doesn't have to be that. You just need a 6 to 8 week Will Brodie-esque style of run. George Hewitt's probably a better comparison in terms of where he's going to be priced at to really pop for you. The one that I'm intrigued the most in is Max Holmes, because that pass it feels like it's just starting to pop for him, the role. It feels like it's just connecting in the system. Like his last 2, 98 and 90 in Dream Team and Fantasy, 101 and 91 in Supercoach. And there's a scattering of 70s plus scores across the year. But if he's a mid forward, he's going to find himself priced in the mid 60s We don't know what the forward stocks are going to look like for us, but we could be seeing a departure. We could lose Dunkley. We could lose a Taranto. We'll probably lose a Cornelio, the Bontempelli, Parkers, and Liberatores that we've gained during the year. We'll lose them too. So I know we always say it every year that we might not have enough depth of forward options and things like that. But a mid-60s guy that's got the potential to go 90s, don't mind him as a consideration if you want to do something a little unique. Let's talk the Gold Coast Suns for the MVP. Another easy choice for you there, Jordox?
Yeah, pretty much. The $1 million man, Cook Miller, starting as a $1 million player in fantasy and dream team.
Yep.
Didn't really live up to it, but it's a bit
Not early.
hard. But no, he still put in another, very good fantasy season. And in the real AFL world, leading that club pretty well as well. So he's a star that's just going to keep on dominating for the next few years.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Let's head over to the drafts. Tim, what do you got for us?
Yeah, no real standout that I could see for the Suns as like a ripping buy, but probably Noah Anderson was pretty solid given where he was drafted. And Took Miller's not really a bargain, but he's certainly been worth the pick.
Which hasn't been true for most of our top 10 to 15 picks this year, is it? Like most of them have been fine, but he's probably one of a few that's really popped for us.
Yep.
Potentially.
That's true. I think you get it every year. You get about a bunch of the top first round or two, and you look at it and you're like, gee, he played like 3 games and he changed his role. And
Where did Brandon Ellis fit in this category?
Ooh, good
he
question.
Picked up defender status this year.
He did.
And he probably wouldn't have been drafted as a defender. Did he get during the year, MJ, or did he get?
He was during the year. So while you're looking at that, the other name that might be an option in people's eyes is a Jared Witts. He had an ADP of 111. He might have done enough in some people's eyes.
Is he the only top tier ruckman that's played every game this year?
Oh, it'd be pretty close. O'Brien missed a game, I think, or two. So he probably for that he's there. Ellis, I'm intrigued on your take on him, Tim, before we move to the Cows, because he's given us, again, in ultimate footy scoring, 5 or 6 scores under 70. And then maybe it's recency bias because he's coming off the 130, 99, 108. But he's burnt us and helped us equally this year.
That's pretty much his whole career in fantasy, isn't it? It's what Brandon Ellis does. If you can predict his season in advance, you'd be a rich man.
Yeah.
End result is he would have not been a free agent. So whoever drafted him has got a mid-80s defender at ADP of 102. And
with a nice feeling.
You'd be happy with it, but it's not amazing.
Not when Doherty's like 10, 20 picks later on an ADP. It's kind of hard to get super keen. Yeah, it's a fair shout. Let's keep powering through. Who's our cow?
Yeah, I really struggled with the Suns, but I ended up landing on Elijah Holland, and let me explain why. So he only played 4 games, and he's, I assume, playing this week, so that'd be 5. All of them late in the season. But in the AFL fantasy comp, there would have been a lot of coaches who started with a guy not named in round 1, knowing or hoping that he'll play eventually. And in the meantime, he can be my loophole guy for that first part of the year when you've got everyone playing. So he served his purpose as a loophole with
red dot strategy, yeah.
And then when he finally came in, he's landed some good scores. He had a big one the other week, I think, in his second game. So anyone that picked him up late or held him all year and had to field him with some of those late outs that we were experiencing, I think he deserves it just for that and the lack of other better options.
Yeah, no, fair enough too. We'll keep powering through. Otherwise, this will be the longest podcast we've ever done. But for me, the watch list is Noah Anderson, who we've already alluded to before. He's going to be priced in that mid-90s range for us next year. But everything about his trajectory has him trending towards being a 110 plus midfielder across the comp. Just a highlight of his potential. Round 17 this year against the Tigers. 26 disposals, 9 marks, 7 tackles, 2 goals. a 141 in AFL Fantasy and Dream Team, and 154 in Supercoach, only with mid-20s possessions. So, yeah, the guy can go. Well, let's talk about the Giants. Who's our MVP? Come
Sorry,
on.
just quickly, Ben
yeah,
King
one
as
more.
well. Ben King as well will be
Good
pretty
shout.
popular.
Especially in
next
Supercoach, where those contested possessions, those impact moments are going to really be favoured nicely. Yep, good shout. Yeah, we're going to get some Josh Kelly love here, Jordox.
No, we're not going to get Josh Kelly love for the MVP. And it was a bit tricky with the Giants. They've had an odd year, when the coach left, and then there was a bit of a change up of things. But in the end, I actually gave it to Cornelio. And the reason is we entered this year with gaining Taranto and Cornelio as forwards. I think everyone was more excited about Taranto, but Cornelio's had a much better year. And, there's a cash cow too, I guess, in some comps. But, since he was put back in the middle, he has dominated. I'm excited to see him next year. Will be a tricky one to pick up, mid-only, but I think Cogs is back. That's what I'm saying.
Yep, fair shout. Who's our draft absolute star here, Tim?
The free agent pickup of the year, Harry Himmelberg.
Big H.
Averaged 103 since round 11.
Wow.
What year is this where Darcy Cameron and Harry Himmelberg have made a list that is in the relevancy territories? Thanks, COVID. You've totally ruined life. Well done.
No, it's great.
No,
it's
lovely
great.
blokes. But let's be honest, neither up until this point have shown any reason to pick them outside of deep dynasty leagues. So full credit to you if you jumped on him. Absolutely true. Who's our cow here, Jordox?
Oh, MJ, you know who I'm going to say. It's the boy we mention every week. Braden Bruce is the cash cow.
There's your one per podcast, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, so he's the cash cow of the year for the Giants and also the biggest headache causer. So, look, we've talked about Bruce. Everyone's talking about Bruce. It continues to be an amazing the theatre of Braden Bruce this year, the in, the out, the suspension, the injury, everything that he's done. But at the end of the day, those who brought him in, particularly for R3, he made a bucket load of cash.
Oh, yes.
So he served his purpose there.
He did his job. So well done to him. For me, the Giant, I've got an eye on in 2023. It's all on the caveat of, do we see the departures that have been mooted of Taranto and potentially including Hopper as well? But if we do see some exodus brewing another, I'm really intrigued on Tom Green next year. I know you could say it's Whitfield or Cumming as options, but Tom Green in the first 8 weeks this year was going at an average of 118 in Supercoach and 99 in AFL Fantasy. He's going to be priced at around low 90s, like 91 in Supercoach, high 80s in AFL Fantasy. He's got that capacity to get 10 to 15 points per game up on what he's priced at. Again, it might not be enough to make him a season-long premium, but there's enough signs and smells about him to think that he could put it all together if he's given the responsibility alongside Cornelio and Kelly of leading that midfield unit. Let's talk about the Hawk. Yep.
Just to add to that, just keep an eye on Lockie Ash and his role with a new coach.
Here we go.
Yeah. I saw a game from
play
Lockie
forward
Ash
pocket
years ago. When he was off halfback, free to roam, he has got fantasy game in him.
There is some pedigree there, without doubt. Yeah. You've just got to get a coach that's going to give him an opportunity, that's for sure, in that role. All right, let's fire through the Hawks, these final half a dozen teams. Who have we got?
MVP, not Tom Mitchell, much to my chagrin, various comps this year, but I'll blame Sam Mitchell for that. Anyway, MVP, very, very similar vein to Sam Doherty in James Sicily. Really came back from a long-term injury and has been brilliant, particularly in Supercoach. Yeah. Absolutely smashed it in that comp, but very good in Dream Team as well.
It's good. Who's our draft buy of the year?
Dylan Moore.
Ooh, Good shout.
93 averaging forward, average draft spot of 186. So basically, you've got a gun premium forward for, well, very late in the draft.
Nothing. Yeah, for basically nothing. How close was Jai Newcomb for you in getting on that list too? Because he's another that has really delivered.
So he was really late, but him being relevant really depends on the draft league. So his average is 88. So he's a pure mid at 88. So obviously, if you snagged him in a keeper, you'd be laughing. But if he's a regular league, 88 averaging mid, it's
okay.
Potentially you could get that off the waiver wire.
Most weeks, yeah.
Depending how deep your draft league is. So that's probably why I had him down a bit.
Yep. No, I think it's a really good shout. Another one of the probably relatively easy cows to look at for us here, Jordox.
Yeah, well, you got me nervous there because there were a few I thought at Hawthorn, but I landed on Josh Ward. He was one of many that we sort of started with, very, very popular. But those that held him when he was out for a period and then he came back would have been very, very much rewarded. Came back in round 17, and that's when you start to see him get real bulk CBAs and really some good scores. Real good player for the future there.
Yeah. Was McDonald was the other one you were kind of flirting around with as
I
agree.
He didn't have the scores, McDonald, but he just kept keeping on. I think he's probably played more games than Ward, but I just like Ward's ceiling. And if you got stuck having to field a cow at this time of year, you'd feel okay with Ward.
Yep. No, fair enough too. For me, the watch list of 2023 is Ned Long. As a junior, still yet to debut for the Hawks, but as a junior showed a lot of fantasy pedigree. Basement price, unless he gets named this week, please, Sam Mitchell, don't ruin him for us. He should be pushing for a regular gig next year, especially if more of the statesmen of the Hawthorn Footy Club, Shields, Mitchell, etc., find less and less time in that midfield. So even with the rumour of a Carl Amon coming into the wings, I think Ned Long would be a really nice trio option in that midfield alongside Newcomb and also alongside the man we just mentioned before in Josh Ward. Let's talk about the Ds. Who's our MVP?
There's a few, but Clayton Oliver just continues to be the number one guy in all the formats. I know he's huge in Supercoach as well, so pretty easy one there.
Yep. Who's our draft here, Tim?
All right, I reckon this guy's the number one draft pick of the year.
Ooh.
Average draft position of 219. He's 100 averaging defender, Angus Brayshaw.
Good shout.
Oh, yeah.
219. He went at 219.
As a mid only. So he's one that picked up the status during the year and became relevant. And then opposite to that, the Ds have now thrown him into the midfield. So work that out.
But they pushed him out of the midfield because they didn't have room for him in there. And now they put him back in the midfield and they realise they don't have room for James Harms. Interesting play by the Ds anyway.
To be a good team where you've got the luxury of moving Angus Brayshaw, who's finished third in a Brownlow medal, to be your versatility swingman. That's a sign of a club that's got too much talent. I like that shout. I really like that shout. Is there any cows, Jordox, or money makers that you were really looking at for the Ds? They're a pretty settled team this year.
Yeah, I really struggled. No surprise the reigning premiers didn't have a heap of kids coming through. I actually came up stumped, so I put Jake Bowie at a stretch because I know there was a little period there with people were getting a little excited about picking him up for an on-field spot early, maybe the first third of the year. And look, that didn't work out, but because he'd hit some good scores, he would have made you a bit of money. So it wasn't a big fail. That's as far as I got. I may have missed one or two along the way, but that's all that stuck out for me.
Right, you don't have to give one out. If their team sucked for cash cards, you can give it to them.
Oh, I wasn't told that pre. Some of these are going to be no. He's okay,
he was fine. People missed probably his best score, which made it hard. But you're right. He's the best of the category.
The cash generation from that big score, was enough to win him the award.
Yeah, no, fair enough too. I agree. I think it's fair enough too. From a Melbourne, the watch list for me, Max Gawn is the guy I'm watching. And the reason is simply this. If the narrative of Luke Jackson departure is true, I would be shocked if they're genuinely looking at Brodie Grundy and Gawn as the 1-2 punch. It's possible, but I'd be really, really surprised if that's how they go. The rucks I see have been a headache this year and could continue on again in 2023. But if Jackson departs and nothing significant comes in, Melbourne will have to play Gawn in a number one clear and supreme role. And that's where, for me, I'm prepared to spend big dollars in the rucks or in any line when I see a clear and supreme option in a line. If Jackson's out, no big options come in that are going to limit that. Big Maxi, it's your year in 2023. Let's jump across the road, not quite to Punt Road, but across the suburb to North Melbourne. Who have you got as the MVP?
I've got the first dual winners of the night. I just couldn't split these two, and both of them for their last 10 weeks, the second half of the year. So Jai Simpkin and Luke Davies-Uniacke have both given North fans a fair bit to get excited about in what's been a pretty bleak few years for their club. But just in terms of fantasy, Simpkin, I know it's been a few years kind of waiting for him to take that next step, and he still hasn't, because he finished last year similar and didn't get going till probably post-buys. But his scoring and the second half of the year has been really good. And then Luke Davies, or LDU, we'll just call him that. Yeah. I don't know a great deal about him. I know he's a big name, and I haven't looked at him in the fantasy world. His scores crept up on me the last 6 to 8 weeks. I had a look at them today and thought, oh, yeah. But his game on Saturday just gone against Adelaide, that reminded me of watching like under 14s footy, and they had to get a 17-year-old to play just to fill in numbers. He looked like, if the analogy works, but he looked like in a different competition
he did.
to the other 43 players on the ground. So, look, it's probably more about the future, but those two share the MVP this year.
No, that's a good shout. In the drafts, you've got a couple of options that you might be looking at here, Tim. Who have you landed for us?
Well, I went with LDU, and I think, as Geordie mentioned off air, that it's, his start wasn't great to the season. I mean, his first game was, but then his first couple of months weren't great. So hopefully no one dropped him.
Oh, imagine that. Imagine that. Oh, that would be worse.
Since I think it's round 8, about round 8 or 9, he's averaged, 104, I think I worked out since then. So basically for the last 3 or 4 months, he's been just awesome.
Yep. You can't disagree. He's not going to make our cash cow category, is he? Now, Jordox, would I go 4 for 4 here, or?
I've been pretty loose with the definition. No, this guy was one of the cash cows of the year, MJ.
Come
Tristan
on,
Sherry.
say it. Yes.
He was brilliant. A lot of coaches started with him, and then anyone that didn't jumped on when he was on the bubble in Supercoach and Dream Team.
Picked up
he's
forward
the number
status,
one
ruck forward status.
Forward. Yeah, shame he had the injury, but he made a heap of money and was very good to play on field.
Yep, no, I agree. For me, the 2023 watch list, you could throw a few in there. Again, the uncertainty of coach structure, roles is always there. But, geez, Tom Powell is a guy that I'm still very, very bullish on what he could be. He'll be priced in a position that I think people won't realize how much value. He'll be going at 50 in Supercoach and 55 in AFL Fantasy and Dream Team. Yet there was a 4-game stretch in his debut year, like his 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th game. This is what he did last 2021 season. 91, 73, 102, 104 in AFL Fantasy and Dream Team, 101, 74, 96, 97 in Supercoach. So there's scoring potential there in AFL level. He's a beast at junior level. The question, of course, is who's coming into coach? How do they balance Simpkin, LDU, Cunnington, and co rolling through there. And maybe Jason Horn-Francis will be through there as well. So it might be a tough one, but if the stars align, he's in the mix.
MJ, you just mentioned someone, and I have to backtrack just quickly because there'll be people listening to this screaming at the podcast that I didn't mention Horn-Francis in the cash cow of the year. So he can share that with Sherry. I missed him when I was looking before, maybe because in my mind...
Cherry's better.
Yeah, you like Cherry better? Yeah, all right.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I thought you nailed it. It was fine. The hyphen was fine. But for what you paid for, I don't think it might have been the quintessential pick, which Cherry probably was a little more. So
special mention.
Special mentions, honourable mentions. All right, let's head to Port Adelaide. Who's the MVP, Jordox?
Yeah, nothing too flash over at the Power this year from a fantasy perspective. Ollie Wines wins it. Didn't have his best year, but that's a bit harsh just because the year before he won a Brownlow and was incredible. But look, he had a fine year. You wouldn't have been happy if you started with him, but if you traded your way into him at the right time this year, particularly in Supercoach as well, you would have been happy. But yeah, he gets the MVP for Port Adelaide.
Yeah, Rosie, was he close for you, or Wines just over the year got you over the line? Okay.
Yeah, he got close, Rosie. And even Butters, I know he was frustrating, but those two, they're finishing quite strong. But no, Wines for the body work.
All right, fair enough. Who's your draft guy here, Tim?
Again, I put Rosie at number 2. So Dan Houston.
Nice.
Dan Houston's averaging, mid-90s at ADP of 102.
Yeah, it's hard to get past that, isn't it?
You'd be pretty happy with that, I reckon.
Oh, yeah.
Started the year with a 150 in DT and fantasy, which would have been instant reward.
Oh, would it?
Yeah, we talked about him. Started the pod, just his ceiling.
Yep. No, it's really, really true. The Cow's interesting one here, Jordox. Who have you landed with?
I didn't have a very long look. I just remembered Sam Hayes and his role that he played for fantasy coaches in a time where, I think it was a time where money was starting to dry up, and then he became R3, maybe R2, if Bruce was doing what he was doing and getting suspended and whatnot. But Hayes, as the number one at Port, once Lycett went down, didn't get as long a run at it as I thought.
Sure.
But did enough to make the cash that those wanted from him.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. And I wouldn't have been opposed if you threw Teakle in there too, more just for that mid-year, that releasing of cash that he could have got you that ruck forward link with Marshall, English, Goldstein. But I think you bang on there when it comes to Hayes being the pick. For me, from a Port Adelaide perspective, we've already mentioned this guy's name, and people will not pick him next year because he burnt them hard. But I am talking about Zach Butters as a watch list. He'll be a mid-only next year. Like I said, uber low ownership because of the hurt he's caused people. But in his last 6, he's averaging 97 in AFL Fantasy and Dream Team, 3 consecutive tons. In Supercoach, he's averaging 103 in his last 6, 4 consecutive tons. And look, it's probably more of an AFL fantasy play where you're looking for value, but he's got the potential to be a 20 points per game, a value starting squad, and unique. So for me, I've got him right in the mix for me.
And definitely mid-only, you were saying?
Definitely mid-only, I think, that he'll be. I've been surprised by positional statuses of guys before, but for me, I think he and Rosie are both mids in 2023. Let's head to the Tigers, our final 5 teams. We'll keep powering through before we wrap it up. Who have you got for us as the MVP?
The MVP, I've got Jaden Short, and then I've put in brackets before he went into the midfield. So start of the year, he was flying. He hit some really good ceiling scores, and then he went into the guts and he lost all those beautiful +6s, the easy mark and kick game. But look, the body of work, he's still handy when he went into the midfield. And next year when Tim Taranto goes to Richmond, we'll see Short back on the half-back flank, and he'll be worthy of our selection again.
Fair enough too. Who's the draft win that really got us over the line here, Tim?
The guy I went for was Vlosten.
Yeah, good shout.
I know he's missed a handful of games, but average of 90 at draft spot of 139 is pretty hard to turn down. And then sort of a quick mention to Dan Rioli as well. He's
Yeah.
on all right with his DPP.
Yep, defender forward. Not quite the Coleman levels of ceiling sometimes, but the availability and versatility, I agree that there's some really good shouts. Who's the cow from the Tigers that we've loved this year, Jordox?
Yeah, they had a few this year, but I can't go past Noah Cumberland. I think he's played 6 games, so he'll play 7 if he plays this week. So certainly didn't help any of us early in the year, but if you wanted to jump on something, in the back half of the year, he made a bit of cash, was fieldable. I thought for many weeks there. And I think more than anything, Richmond fans would be absolutely licking their lips at the prospect of this guy. He looks a player, MJ.
Yeah.
Very exciting.
How close did Gibcus get for you as a candidate in there, knowing he started the year and was probably more popular in ownership? He was in the mix.
Of Gibcus, he, particularly in Supercoach, he was very, very good the first half of the year. And a really great story too, like to be a top 10 draft pick in a club like Richmond and to really just play from the outset and really do well. So, special mention to him, but Cumberland he gets you off the seat of your couch. Let me just say really quickly on Cumberland, it's not really even fantasy relevant, but that week where he took the mark, he played on as the siren went, and he cost them the potential for a draw, I think it was. That's huge for a young kid to carry on his shoulders. The next week, he got the Rising Star nom, did he? I'm pretty sure he did.
Yeah, I think that sounds about right.
I think that's amazing that he did that. So anyway, enough of that.
Yeah, he's a high-quality human being too. From a 2023 watch list, no one's playing a real hard guess here. It's Dusty. He'll pick up a discount for us after missing a heap of footy this year. Depending on the names we get coming at us, he could be the best forward buy we've got. He genuinely could be the buy of the year. So
don't do it, MJ. Every year, say this. Every year.
Hey, Will Brodie was right eventually, so we'll get back there, mate. It'll be totally fine.
From there.
It will be totally fine.
What about if he heads to the Sydney team?
Toronto?
Dusty.
Dusty.
Does that increase your interest?
No.
Or is it just regardless?
No, it doesn't increase my interest whatsoever because I think he'll be only getting a handful of midfield minutes given the development of kids that are there and will be allowed to play as a predominant forward. So, no, for me, it's if he stays at Tigerland, go for it. If he goes to Sydney, which I don't think will happen, my interest is quite low. We'll get to the Swans in a minute. Let's talk about the Saints. Who's the MVP, Jordox?
Another dual winner for the MVP. Now, my boy Jack Steele, very unlucky, fellas, very unlucky. He only hit low tons at the start of the year, only, in the DT and fantasy formats.
Yes.
He's one of the $1 million men's deal. So, and then he missed a chunk with injury and has been terrible the last 2 weeks. So the winner, Jack Sinclair and Brad Crouch together. So
wow.
Sinclair, for the option he's offered coaches in that back line, absolutely brilliant. For a long time, I know in Dream Team with Fantasy, he was just hitting high 90s, low tons, and then he started hitting these ceiling games. Absolute ripper.
Yep.
And then Brad Crouch, we know what he can do. And particularly when Steele was out of the side, he went on with it. And, it would have been a real unique pick back half of the year, but you would have been rewarded.
Yeah, it's a good shout. For drafts, which Saint, is it any of those two names there, Tim, or is there some others?
Yeah. No, definitely Sinclair. Sinclair would be one of the picks of the year for drafts. Yeah. He was ADP of 132 for 103 averaging back. So I don't think you go past that one for the Saints.
No, I think that's a fair shout too. If we're talking about the cow, how early in the year are we reminiscing at this point, Jordox?
Yeah, so a special mention does go to Jack Hayes. He was excellent. He such a shame he went down there. I think he only played the 6 games, but he made a heap of cash and had that ruck forward flexibility as well. You mentioned that Teagle had the back end. But I've given it to Marcus Windhager,
Nice.
who is only being talked about now because he's tagging superstars into almost, the ground. He's actually played most of the year. I was surprised how many games he played. Hasn't hit up anything too exciting score-wise. But one of the things that's most important about a cash cow is their role and their job security. And once he landed that tagging role, he's been brilliant. Forward status as well. I think he gets it.
Yeah, I think it's a really fair shout. For me, the 2023 watch list, come on, this should be easy. Rowan Marshall, ladies and gentlemen, really simple. Let me give you the stats of...
Isn't the watch list Paddy Ryder more than Marshall himself?
No, no. But you are right. It is the Ryder effect. Here's how it is. Last season, or this season so far, playing with Patrick Ryder in AFL Fantasy and Dream Team in the 11 games, he's going at an average of 78.5. In the 9 games without Ryder, he's going at 111.8. That is a differential of 33.2 points. In Supercoach, in the 11 games with Ryder, going at 75.8. In the 9 without, 114.9. That is a differential of 39.1. He should be ruck forward for us again next year. He's only recently picked it up. So there is a chance that this recent ruck run might be enough to throw it over the line, but I think he holds it. But regardless, no Ryder, lock in Marshall as one of the most obvious picks of 2023 if there's no Paddy Ryder. Let's go to the Swans.
Forward status.
I think he's done enough, but the recent 3 or 4 weeks without Ryder might just tip him over the line to not get it, but I think he does get it. Who's your Swan MVP as we hit the final 3 teams?
Yep, Callum Mills, quite easy.
Obvious pick.
Right
pick.
He stepped up last year when he was moved into the midfield, and then this year again. Look, he still has these games that it's very frustrating, particularly if you put the C on him, where he just sort of doesn't get amongst it. And the lack of clarity around his role, I think, would be concerning as well. But, he's one of the absolute best in the comp. His ceiling is as good as anyone's. I would just like to see him settle on a particular role. Might not happen though.
Yep. And part of that might just be about some of the deficiencies that still exist in other spots that might be able to get resolved with some further development of kids or things like that. How close was Parker for you, given that he picked up forward status heading into round 6, or was it Mills and not really anybody else?
Look, I think I was a bit of a Parker denier for most of the year. I just wasn't interested in him, and he just kept doing it. I mean, it's tricky because that forward line had guys like, we talked about Mitch Duncan, Taranto, Cornelia, so Luke Parker was an option, but he was one of many. And just with his age, I really thought that Sydney had moved towards a much younger sort of, I thought he'd been squeezed out of that midfield, but he has been the man back into the year and second half of the year particularly. But no, still Mills. You can't go past him.
No, fair enough too. Who's our draft absolute boom pick that we should have jumped on this year from the Swans, Tim?
A pretty clear guy for the Swannies would be Chad Warner. ADP of 227 for the Chad. So what is he, 90 averaging forward?
Yeah.
Mate.
Yeah, anytime you can get a 90 averaging mid at that point in time of the draft, that's not bad, man. From the Chad. The Chad is great, no question about that. Who's the cow here, Jordox? Did they give us many guys to look at?
No, I didn't think they did, but I landed on Dylan Stevens as someone who was still quite cheap. I think probably more so in Supercoach. And I think he was in and out, but he's played a lot in the last, maybe played the last 4, I'd say, and he's putting up okay scores. So I went with him. I didn't think.
Come on,
did you have?
Jordox.
Anyone else?
I had Paddy McCartan.
Yeah.
Come on, mate.
All
Are
right.
you're just fleecing us now of the cow swan that we all had.
It's been a long year, MJ.
It's been a long year and a longer podcast. So I understand the entrapment.
McCartan by far and away is
By the
best
length of
cash
the
cow, but-
Flemington Straight, Paddy McCartan.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
you're
I'm
right.
glad you
Stevens
corrected
has
me there.
been very important late.
Yeah.
So definitely a silver medal coming to you for that one. The 2023 watch list is the man that Tim mentioned for me, Chad Warner. He's progressing exactly on that pathway to premium territory. Went 69 across the formats last year, going 89 so far in AFL Fantasy and Dream Team. I think it's about 98 in Supercoach. This is exactly the trend of where your premium game-changing midfielders head. So for me, he's going to be one of the stars of the competition. And gosh, if you got him in a keeper league in your redraft this year, man, you have done some very nice work. That's going to set you up for success.
Just throw in Peter Laddams. I'm not ready to give up on him yet.
Okay, keep holding on.
I think that number one ruck role will be his eventually. It's just, I think he's still pretty good.
Yep. No, fair shout too. Final two teams. Let's talk about the Eagles. Good luck finding an MVP here, Jordox.
Well, the MVP, I think of all the teams where the MVP sums up the season that team had is West Coast, because Shannon Hearn, at the ripe old age of, I'm not sure what he is, but but someone in his twilight years, I'll say, to be more respectful. Absolutely brilliant, predominantly in Supercoach, but in Dream Team as well, in a year where all the usual suspects in the fantasy world for West Coast were either injured, underdone, or just missing in action.
Yeah, that's true. Good luck on the draft here, Tim.
No, it's the same answer. Shannon Hearn.
Yep.
He's a one-man band down at the Eagles this year. Just 92 average at 123 ADP.
Yeah, it's just not been there's just not been an option, really, has there? Even with the Cows, I think I know where you're going, but let's wait and see who's the cow for you here, Jordox, that you want to award it to.
I got another dual winner because I split these two. Brady Hoff for Perseverance.
Yes.
So he played early days, and a lot of people would have had him in the original squad and held him. And it was quite frustrating when COVID and the like was ravaging the Eagles squad, and he still wasn't getting the game. They were playing, non-AFL listed players. Anyway, he did come back in and has looked pretty good. Picked up a neat little sort of tidying up off half back role.
Yep.
At times, and so for those that held him, he repaid the faith. And then Greg Clark for the that immediate sugar hit, that immediate cash generation. He came in and looked $1 million, and a couple of good options for the future there for West Coast.
I love the year of Paddy Nash as a cash cow. He was one that really snuck under the radar for a lot of people because I think that was the genuine thought of, he's there for the top up. He's there as the top up. And then it wasn't just the 1 week or the 2 weeks. It was the 5 weeks and the 6 weeks and the 7 weeks that really got him through there.
And he was one of their better scorers amongst that period.
Early days he was, yeah. So for me, he's kind of that cash cow that I think got away from a lot of people that didn't go there for that reason of, this is his last game. He'll get squeezed out. This is his last game.
Yeah. Once West Coast get all their bodies back, he'll be squeezed out. But
he's one of those forgotten cows of 2022, not in the sense of people forgot him, but people didn't go near him because of that security concern that we had. For me, the Eagle that I don't want to say this. I don't want to say it. It's Elliot Yeo. I don't want to say it, but everything about the numbers is there that says and this is the big if it's an injury-free preseason, no problems. You don't need 12 games. You just need 6. He will be the mid-price guy. Remember, in 2019, he was averaging tons across the formats for us. Before a discount hits in Dream Team, he'll be priced in the 50s. before a discount hits in Supercoach, he'll be in the 60s. Now, in AFL Fantasy, it'll be off his 2021 average of 83. He could be priced in the 40s in some of these formats. You tell me you see a guy that only 2 years back is coming off tons and is fit and firing and ready to prove something. You can't tell me you don't see a couple of 100,000 Elliot Yeo and you just get a little itchy trigger finger on the selection.
Throw in defender status and you've sold me. Done.
Well, there's every chance that might just pop too. So it'll be interesting to see. All right, the
Keep
final.
an eye on
oh, yep.
Alex Witherden.
Oh no,
Don't know
not
where
you.
he's at.
Don't do it to yourself.
Yeah. Alex Witherden. West Coast might have a new coach.
Sure.
Shanahan's going to play on by the sound of it, which is the main thing you're looking for if you're a Alex Witherden truther. But I am, and I think, keep an eye on him.
All right, fair enough. All right, our last club, and this might be our longest podcast of the year. So well done, lads and ladies, for making it this far through. The Bulldogs. Who's our MVP?
Yeah, I had a bit of fun with this one because you could go Jack McRae, even though Fantasy Dream Team hasn't been that good. Supercoach he has. You go Dunkley doing his thing in the forward line. Bont. They've got so many, but I've given it to Tim English.
Why not?
Who led the charge for the first sort of half of the year. He had an unfortunate situation where he got COVID and the head knock and whatnot, but he was just churning out tons. It was such a great year to watch Tim English become what we all sort of thought he might be. And he was a forward ruck. So with that flexibility, he gets the MVP.
Yep. Yeah, I don't disagree. He's right in the mix for us there. Who's our draft day star, Tim?
I didn't go English because his ADP is surprisingly low. So everyone was kind of onto him. But Bailey Smith was the guy I went.
Yeah, good shout.
It was, 107 average for ADP at 82. That'd be higher than some of the guys who went in the first round, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
And one of the guys, you see this classic trend where a player loses DPP status and becomes mid-only. And all of a sudden, we all kind of think, he's not forward now. But when they're putting up midfield numbers anyway, and then he went and got it in the other formats anyway, mid-year.
Yep. I think it's an interesting one. The cows interest me here, Jordox. Who have you landed with?
Well, I landed on Robbie McComb for
I think it's a good shout.
Longevity. And he just kept on going, and he just kept on getting a spot in that team and scored, between 50 and 70 in Dream Team Fantasy most weeks. So that's what you want from a cow.
Yeah, and he picked up forward status for you too. That might have just extended that run on field, depending on how you balance out. I think you're right. I think he's the clear dog's choice. I think it's a really good shout from you. The 2023 watch list, you could put a bunch of guys in here. I'm going to go left field because if you've made it this far in the podcast, you deserve a little bit of something. I'm going Ed Richards as the 2023 watch list guy for me. In his last 5, his scoring range in AFL Fantasy and Dream Team has been between 88 and 109. And in Supercoach, his last 5 has been between 97 and 126. Yeah, he's going to be priced in the mid-70s in AFL Fantasy and low to mid-80s in Supercoach. I think it's more an AFL Fantasy kind of guy to go and take a flyer on. But my goodness, he has impacted the scoring of Dale and Daniel, and he does seem to be the flavour of the month for Bevo. But gee whiz, he's been sensational.
He will be the Hayden Young of next year.
Ooh. All right, there you go. That's a nice one.
I don't have enough faith in Bevo to say that.
Yeah, well, that's the problem, isn't
it? There's like a timeline. He's like, hang on a minute, this guy's been a premium back for too long. I need to put someone else there.
Yeah.
Like you just rotate. I can't go through all of the 6 odd years he's been there, but
Johannesson, Daniel, Dale,
Bob Murphy.
Murphy.
There's been so many. like to say confidently that Ed Richards is going to take over the premium status that Bailey Dale, who's surely a better kick than him, and Caleb Daniel have been. It's a big call across the whole season.
That's a bird person right there.
I can't remember who it was, but I do know pre-season this year there was an interview I saw with a Western Bulldogs player, a senior player. I can't remember who it was. And the interview was a range of players who have had a good pre-season and whatnot. And they said, Ed Richards is someone we want to get the ball in his hands. We want to play through him, which got me excited earlier in the year. Didn't really score much, but he's doing it now. So
I know one of our panelists in Supercoach started with him. They were that bullish on him, and they're going, I was right. I was just 18 weeks early, but I was right. And so it will be an interesting one to watch in the off season, because as you both mentioned, the potential's there, but the Bevo getting bored and moving the magnets is definitely a real thing from him. Lads, you've been absolutely sensational, not just on this episode, but right throughout the full 2022 season in the preseason. So Tim, mate, as always, mate, appreciate your fine work.
Cheers.
And Jordox, to you, mate, an absolute pleasure, mate. Well done.
Thanks, mate, and thank you to you, MJ, for all the work you put in and the fantastic content that you put out for the fantasy world. It's very much appreciated, and I'm glad to have been a part of it again this year.
Yeah, we love having you guys as a part of the coaches panel, but ultimately we love having you as a part of a listening community, reading community, a part of the fantasy footy community. The reason we do what we do is because, like you, we love talking about, we love the conversations that can be had. We love learning and growing along with you. So from me and from all of us here at the Coaches Panel, thank you for heading right throughout the year to coachespanel.tv and reading the articles, for keeping in touch with us across social media at Coaches Panel through the year, and checking out these podcasts that have been landing since January 1. We have dropped around about 80 episodes for you to check out, and that's not included what we've given to our Patreons, which is a bunch of other things. So if you've made it through this season with us, thank you so much. We've loved doing it. But the good news is our attention moves to 2023 really quickly. What you'll get from us in the off season, our Patreons will get everything, but there'll only just be a few things that comes the way into the public feed. So coachespanel.tv, if you're not a Patreon, for as little as a couple of bucks a month, you can get involved, or you can subscribe via Spotify podcasts to get the podcasts that drop in the off season. Here's what's coming your way, friends. The top 50 keeper prospects podcast season from Kane and I. Last year, we broke them into 7 tiers. Who made the list and why? We will talk you through that. Every player that moves clubs in the trade and the off-season period, we'll give you our fantasy footy review, player-by-player write-up, and then a podcast only for Patreons. You will get that review. And then we might even just drop a few other nuggets of articles that Louis is working on, some podcasts too for us that you'll get to hear about. They will be available for everyone, but you'll get those in the off season as well. And then once we hit December, the positions land early December, mid-December, the prices hit across your formats. And then just before Christmas, it's on. And then January 1, guess what I'll be doing with you, friends? Every single day for 50 days, you'll be doing podcasts with me, talking about the 50 most relevant. We're bringing it back again for you in 2023. Thanks so much for being with us in 2022. We can't wait to spend 23 talking fantasy footy with you yet again.